Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started so that we can stay on schedule. If you were on a few minutes ago, you probably heard me say this is being recorded. It'll be on YouTube. We'll make sure we email the link out again after, just as we did with last night's workshop. We have that playlist on YouTube for all 4 of the workshops that are going on during the Utah Lake Winter Fish Fest. If you haven't met me before or didn't come last night, my name is Sam Brager. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Utah Lake Commission, and I'm one of the staff working on this event. So we're excited to have you guys participating. Hopefully you can have some good luck out there catching some great fish. And today's workshop here to hopefully help with that. And I'm excited for it personally. I'm a novice angler myself. I've never done ice fishing. Payton Skidmore is here to share some of his thoughts and some information with us on ice fishing itself. So Payton will take over the time here, and we appreciate everybody who's tuned in.
Awesome. Well, cool. First and foremost, Sam, thank you for the opportunity. It's cool to be here and to represent the anglers of Utah Lake during this challenge. And hopefully I can share some thoughtful insight and people can catch some fish. So just a quick background. So I grew up fishing off and on with my father at Flaming Gorge. We would go trolling for the kokanee up there. And then I was kind of on a hiatus of fishing just as we all got older. And like most people, COVID happened and, I got sick of staying inside and I wanted to get out and just rediscover my passion for fishing. And it took off 150% from there. So eventually winter comes around, and if you're not prepared for ice fishing, you pretty much just don't go. And I wasn't going to accept that. So I went down to Lincoln Beach. I bought a couple rods and just like 2 years ago and ended up having a great time. And it's just kind of been progressing from there ever since. So since then, I've started YouTube. You can find me at SkiddyFishing, SKIDDY fishing. And I've got some videos at Utah Lake as well with some ice fishing and tips, but I'm going to try and cover the gear that I'm using, some tips with that, specifically some detail with the augers, general locations you can go to, of course, ice safety, and then just kind of how I successfully retrieve the fish and things like that. So now, first and foremost, if anybody's watching this and you've never ice fished before, there's no better place to start than Utah Lake. And the big obvious reason for that is it's massive and it covers a lot of ground in your local neighborhood, right? So as mentioned on the website, you've got 28 or more access points around the lake. So it's not hard to get to. And most of that's going to be Saratoga on the northbound and all the way down to Genola-ish on the southbound end of that lake. But if you're looking to get started, you could probably get started today for about $15 to $25. I actually went to my local Walmart and Sportsman's Warehouse to grab some lures and just like a basic ice combo. And I actually didn't even have an auger. That was the crazy thing. I went down to Lincoln Beach hoping that holes would be pre-cut, and that was pretty much the case. So I did have to bring a mallet or a hammer to knock in the top layers of that, of course, but people will abandon holes and they'll move on to other ones and you can catch fish through those. So it really didn't cost an arm and a leg just to get started. And that's one thing that I really appreciated about the sport. And then another reason why I like Utah Lake as a beginning stepping stone for fishing is, there's always people there. So as an angler myself, I've got friends and family that really like to go out, but typically that's the summer months, right? So it was a little intimidating to go step on ice, not knowing that, my family knew where I was, things like that. And of course you want to keep people in the loop, know where you are at all times, but there was always people there at Utah Lake. So I felt safe. And, so with that being said, I don't think that there's a better lake to start ice fishing than Utah Lake. So plus there's this cool challenge. So it's just all the more reason to get out and have some fun. So at this point, I'm going to talk about some gear and some things that I use. Now in the state of Utah, I use 2 rods at the same time, which is an awesome thing that's allowed these days, somewhat recent too, I believe, but I'll have one rod that's stationary and I'll have one rod that I use for jigging. So if you fish, obviously jigging is typically a lure, something like this Rapala right here. And you're just using the action of the lure to kind of create some turbulence like a wounded fish or like a spooked fish, it usually will trigger some reaction strikes. So I use a jigging rod, and then I will use a stationary rod, and I will tip it just with a bell of some sort, just so I know that something's happening. So now your basic ice fishing rod, it's not very big for obvious reasons. You're just going to be right over the hole when you're fishing. At Utah Lake, if you're looking to get your first ice rod, you don't need an intense action, right? I mean, there are some big fish in Utah Lake, walleye and northern pike, but typically when I go, I'm going for the perch and the white bass. So I don't need something to heavily compensate the line. So I just like a light action. It's enough for me, but you can have a second rod to kind of be prepared for those, big fish moments. So some of the test line that I use at Utah Lake, once again, it kind of coincides with the light action. I use a lot of 2-pound test line and 4-pound test line, and I've actually pulled in 20-inch trout with 2-pound test line. So I think it's pretty forgiving for the most part, but I do prefer fluorocarbon over monofilament, but I don't think there's really a wrong option there as well. But that's kind of what I use. But most of the time, if you go to the store and you buy a combo, it's pre-spooled probably with 6 or 8 test strength, and it's probably monofilament. So caught plenty of fish doing that. So for my jigging rod, this is kind of my go-to tackle. So once again, I've got this Rapala jigging wrap. Now keep in mind that at Utah Lake, I think the smaller the lure, the better. And so the way how this works is it's got a little piece of plastic at the tail end. And when you jig up, it actually creates almost like a circular sensation that can create a wounded fish. And so a lot of white bass will actually strike that. And you can jig it in different ways, but we'll kind of cover that here shortly. The colors that I like to use with a lure like this is Fire Tiger. It's pretty much the rainbow ish color. And then of course, just straight white or straight orange are good for me as well. If you're targeting smaller fish like the panfish, the smaller the lure, once again, the better. So I use a lot of Tungsten Jigs. I do prefer orange color for this, but a lot of people will tax these or tip them with waxworms. And there's plenty of places to get waxworms. You can even go to your, local pet store if you want, but I just get these at Walmart. They're just pre-bagged. They're good to go. You can cut them in half and save them, and white bass will go crazy over these. So I'll tip small Tungsten Jigs typically with these as well. And then lately, my go-to lure, and I've done this almost exclusively this year, every situation, and that's the Swedish Pimple. So this lure right here, once again, it's not big. It's kind of like a Castmaster, right? So it's a small spoon. It is white only on one side, and it's silver on the opposite. And I just jig this up and down, and fish will go crazy. I've caught perch, I've caught white bass, I've caught small bluegill, or actually good sized bluegill and crappie actually with this as well. And then always double check your proclamations, but I do believe that at Utah Lake, you can use dead white bass as meat. So I will usually tip this with white bass meat. So fish are very cannibalistic, so they'll get a taste of it, and typically they'll come back for a second bite if you kind of spook them, if they like that. So and then for my second rod, my stationary rod, just the simple Aberdeen hook with a worm or a night crawler, or I use a white ball head jig tipped with night crawler as well. And that seems to be my favorite type of lure for stationary baits. And you can use these little eagle claw ones as well. And I find that a lot of yellow perch actually like to bite onto this as well. So just food for thought for things like that. But my setups aren't anything extravagant. I have an Ugly Stick ice runner, and that's a $20 rod. And then I've got a Placino Amazon rod that runs about $50, and that's a combo as well. And both have caught hundreds of fish so far. So that's kind of my gear. I do have an auger as well. And I did mention at the very beginning that an auger isn't required to go down to Utah Lake. Obviously it does help, but things are a little difficult to find in this lovely pandemic. So, you're probably going to pay a little bit more for things, the cost of materials, and then the buy rates are high, right? So, but if you play your cards right and you go to Facebook Marketplace, or you find like a KSL ad, you can usually find a used auger, a hand auger specifically, for about, I don't know, $25. So if you see one, jump on it quick, and then you can sharpen the blades at your local Ace Hardware or True Value, things like that. So brand new retail, though, you're probably going to pay about $70 or $80 for one of those. So just keep that in mind. So once again, in my first year, I just took a mallet, just went down and hammered in some holes that were already kind of there and slightly froze over. But it does change the game significantly. And then, of course, if you're inclined to buy a powered auger, there are gas ones and there are electric ones. The gas ones are significantly louder, possibly a little heavier. The electric ones will use a lithium battery, so they're a lot lighter, and they're obviously quieter as well. So less likely to spook fish with an electric auger over a gas auger. But I don't know. I've experienced it all in all scenarios I catch fish. So I think it's all possible. Now, when I use my auger, I will always cut the hole that I want to fish at first. I assume I'm going to spook the fish away when I'm drilling that hole. And so I'll cut it, I'll clear the eye shavings off the surface, and then I'll move on to my stationary hole second. That sounds obvious, but the fish might move in the direction of where you're going to cut your hole, and then you might spook them back in the direction. Kind of as mentioned in one of the previous workshops, I think it was mentioned that Utah Lake can be up to about 10 feet deep, but I find a lot of places in the harbor about 4 to 6. So it doesn't take a lot to really get the fish kind of active in that area, right? So one thing with the hand auger too, and it goes without saying, is you are going to work out while doing it. Even with 4 inches of ice, I have made my triceps so sore while doing so. So, just be prepared for that. But now, another obvious thing to cover is when you're cutting with an auger, you do want to be straight up and down. I can't tell you how many times that during just pushing down and you're tired, you're fatigued, you're starting to lean on the auger, and you don't even realize you're doing that. All of a sudden, you've cut an angle straight off to the side, and it may not even be an angle until the very bottom of that hole. So that can make your line work and retrieving a fish a little bit more difficult. So you just got to be a little more conscious with the hand auger of what you're doing and kind of how far you're, or just the consistency of how straight it is. So, and then lastly, when you cut that hole, ice will build back up. So I do recommend having like a slush scoop of some sort to clear that turbulence, because that can mess with your line work as well. So just another thing to consider. But if you're just going to get started today, honestly, you probably don't even need an auger. I think there's going to be plenty of people down at Utah Lake, and most people will cut holes just to test the depth, and then they'll move on. They'll move deeper and deeper into the harbors, and they'll leave those other holes abandoned. And as long as you're being courteous to their spots, you can pretty much come right in and scoop up a hole. And I've seen holes that have been abandoned for hours that will catch plenty of fish too. So, so that kind of covers auger use. And then we've covered a little bit of the rods that I use and the types of lures that I use. Pretty much, once again, when I'm fishing for white bass. So, a lot of white bass at Utah Lake can be pretty good size, but most fish are going to have pretty small mouths. So the smaller, the better. Another thing too, actually, while I'm covering that, is I think fish are kind of like bullies, right? So if, the stereotypical movie, bullies don't pick on the buff kid in school, they pick on, the smaller one. So that's kind of how fish are, right? So that's why I think the smaller, the better. The fish won't necessarily work so hard, especially when it's cold. They're a little bit more lethargic. They have to save that energy. So they're going to make sure it's worth their time to fight for that. Another misconception too that I've kind of heard of is, Utah Lake's obviously very murky, but it doesn't matter where I put my lure, fish will eventually find it. So don't be afraid of how murky it is, and don't think you've got to use the biggest lure possible to grab that attention. Fish will feel the turbulence in the water. They'll see it. They'll definitely strike it. It's just a matter of how much fish are in that general area, right? So that covers that. Moving on to eye safety, which is, the most important thing really here. So no ice is guaranteed at any given point. So what was 6 inches yesterday or last week could all of a sudden be 4 today. And I've actually found that once this year, specifically at the Utah Lake Provo Marina, is it rained early in January and it was already iced over and people were walking all over the place, and that completely wiped out the harbor. And then it took a couple days or almost a week to really build it back up. So always pay attention to weather and think of what's happened kind of in the past before you commit to that drive. But another thing too is the state parks also have cameras. So you can typically check the cameras and kind of see the somewhat conditions, right? But obviously the best way to test it is to physically be there. So when it comes to general safety of ice, 4 inches is what you're kind of looking for. And to give you an idea, I'm 250 pounds and I'll walk on 4 inches all day, every day without really being too worried about it. So obviously 4 inches could change to 3 within a matter of seconds and inches. So you want to consistently test the depth as you're moving out into the water. And then 5 inches is considered, kind of like a group ice condition. So you still want to be a little spread out, but you can typically stay grouped together, in closer proximity. And then 6 to 7 inches, debatably safe for ATVs or snowmobiles. Personally, I would prefer it to be thicker than that. But, since I've started ice fishing Utah Lake, I found it pretty rare that the ice conditions can exceed 9 inches thick, really. So, it's pretty obvious that the lake is on the valley. So when it gets warm, the first places that are going to melt are the lakes in the valley, unlike Strawberry or Schofield and higher elevation lakes, right? So always be prepared for that. And then another thing to consider is ice will crack while you're on it. And there's nothing that will stand you still dead center in the spot that you're at than just the crack of the ice. And if you're consistently measuring 4 inches, you're relatively okay. Obviously be proactive and aware of your surroundings, but I've had cracks just move right between my legs, and that's usually a cautious sign. I'll start to move back a little bit, but it's just something that will happen. It's inevitable. So, and then one more thing really on the ice safety is ice will typically be more shallow or thin towards the shorelines. So it's almost like the shore and the dead center tend to be the thinnest ice, but somewhere in the middle of that's where you're going to find some safe ice. So that's another reason why I like the marinas, because I'll kind of start with the docks. The docks will stay there all year, and then you can kind of work your way out for them. So, and then general ice safety as well. You do want to wear some good boots that you won't slide around at. And it sounds obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I see people with a bell on their rod and it starts to go off and you're excited. All you're thinking about is setting that hook, and then you start to slip and you land on your back, and you'll feel it tomorrow. But just, be aware of how slick the ice can get, especially now that the sun's up and it'll kind of melt some top layer water a little bit. So, and then always be in the general eye of another angler while you're on the ice as well. So, for anybody that's just joining, that's part of the reason why I like Utah Lake, is because I often go by myself, but typically there are other anglers there. So just be in proximity and within some kind of eyesight of another person. So, and then locations, and keep in mind that this is mostly for beginners. This is what I have found to work for me personally. And obviously anybody who ice fishes on the regular will have a different opinion. This is what yields fish for me. So, and I'm here to kind of tell you guys how to catch just fish in general. So there are videos all over YouTube, and there's people that can tell you how to catch 100+ days. My average catch rate is probably somewhere between, 5 and 20. So, which is a good day for me personally. But as mentioned on the website, Utah Lake has more than 28 access points ranging from Saratoga Springs down to Genola. And some of those locations you may have to pay for, and that's typically going to be the state parks. So I did a little bit of research yesterday, and it does look like it's cheaper to go in the winter. It says $10 on the Provo Marina for car parking, and then $4 for walk-in. Typically there's a small parking lot at the base of the river just before the state park. So you may be able to park there and then do the $4 walk-in. But personally, I like the state parks pass. I paid $100 for it last year. It has gone up just a little bit, but if you go ice fishing and you catch fish, most people are going to love it. You're sold into the sport. You're going to start looking for other opportunities and other places to go to. And because of road conditions, state parks are often plowed and they're accessible. So I find that if you just pay that $100 and you go 5 to 10 times, you're probably going to pay for that and then some, right? So, and then usually in the winter or the spring and summertime, you're going to end up spending $15 per day parking. So get the state parks pass. It's worth it. Also, another reason why, so where I fish typically is the state park as well. That's a given, but there's convenient parking, especially at Provo Marina. If you haven't seen it, it's kind of like a standard marina. It's kind of like a U shape, and you can be on the right side or the left side, and you can park pretty much all around that spot. And there's bathrooms, there's garbages, and all the amenities are pretty much there for you. So, so you'll typically find me at a state park. Now, if you want free parking, you can go down to Lincoln Beach, or there's just some general access points on the lake. Keep in mind that those places typically won't have as many anglers, but you know, that's where I started, was Lincoln Beach. The harbor is very small, and I have found that you can still spread out from people and be courteous and still catch plenty of fish there. In fact, I've caught the same amount of fish and the types of species at both Lincoln Beach, American Fork Harbor, and Provo Marina. So whether you pay or it's free, every day is different. You never really know what you're going to get. Now, if you're looking for Northern Pike, I'm not going to share too many secrets, but somewhere behind West Mountain is kind of most people's go-to places for the Northern Pike. But you know, I do enjoy the Provo Marina the most, and that's pretty much where you'll find me. In fact, through this challenge, I'm going to be filming some videos for my YouTube channel down there. And one little secret to consider it as well there is the depth there is about 4 to 6 feet deep, but I do find that fish prefer deeper waters, and they'll find pockets where it's the deepest. So right off the boat ramps, right? People are going to put their boats in, they're trenched out a little bit so the bottoms don't hit the bottom of the lake. And I'll find that a lot of fish will be huddled up specifically just out from those boat ramps. But if you find me at Utah Lake, I'll work my way to that area, but I'll always start with the docks. And, you know, I find that fish are all over in the depth column. So especially with how shallow the lake is, but some fish will be huddled up specifically underneath those docks as well. So you can go on the dock side on the bank, or you can go in the direction towards the middle and, you know, just dip your line in, and you'll find them shallow. You'll find them at the bottom. And I do think that the fish kind of like that shelter, that structure for safety. So you'll find a lot of white bass under there, but typically just right off those boat ramps is where you kind of want to be. So, and then, you know, when it actually comes to catching the fish, what I'll do is, so we kind of covered the jigging rod and the stationary rods. And with my jigging rod, once you have cleared your hole, you cleared the ice, I'm going to just open my bail and I'm going to drop my line all the way to the bottom. It won't take long, obviously, with the shallow, but you'll know because your line starts to curl up a little bit. At that point, I'll close my bail, I'll reel up just a little bit, and I'll work off the bottom. A lot of yellow perch hug the bottoms of the lake. So if you're looking for those, you're going to find them deeper than more shallow. The white bass are kind of all over the place. I've caught them literally just an inch underneath the ice holes before. So you just play with your depth a little bit. So if you're jigging off the bottom and you go 5-10 minutes without catching anything, you can kind of retrieve up a little bit and work the middle of the column. And then you can work a little bit more shallow if you want. And then, you know, with my stationary rod, I'll typically just only hug the bottom. So I'll just let the fish find it. And, you know, a lot of the times that'll be the yellow perch because of that. So, and then, you know, another reason to start at the docks is you can test the ice depth from there as well, right? So I'll see where the fish are, I'll see where they're kind of huddled up, and then I'll start working my way out to the middle, and I'll cut holes consistently as I'm going out so I can test the thickness of the ice. And I found 4 different times this year, almost the dead smack middle of Provo Marina has been about 6 inches. So I haven't been there in a week, so that could be different. So be cautious, but it is, you can test the depth pretty much by starting at the dock and moving out. So, and then with jigging, there's a bunch of different techniques that you can do. And sometimes you have to work off of the style of the lure that you're using. So if you're using a Rapala jigging wrap like this, you want to use the action of the lure for yourself, right? So if I'm twitching it just a little bit up and down, you'll actually find that, it just kind of creates almost like a spooked sensation for the fish. But if you kind of retrieve up, almost like a quick pull up, you'll actually find that your lure will launch up and then it will just kind of drift back down. And a lot of fish will find that as a injured fish, and you'll get reaction strikes that way. But sometimes that's not what they're looking for. You may just have to go just subtle. Subtle will win the race, or sometimes you just want to go aggressive. So play around with the action of your lure. And once you start catching fish, you'll kind of play off of what's working. So another thing too is I typically will dip my ice rod towards the hole. It's almost like I'm using it like, like a pointer, right? So I'm going to hold it with my index finger and my thumb, and I'm just going to work just in a straight down, because, you're directly above the fish. So when you set the hook, you've got to come straight up. So give yourself enough room to work that action so you can successfully catch that fish. And then by times range, obviously. So I found that in most cases when you fish, you will find success mostly early in the morning. So if I go out tomorrow, I'm probably going to be there at about 7:20 in the morning, and I will probably start losing the bite time around 9. So earlier the better. Sometimes the fish become active towards, brunch and afternoon. And then typically right before sunset, you'll start, finding more active fish during those bite times. So, and then with bait, you can tip your lures with some dead white bass meat, or you can tip them with worms. Sometimes wax worms or mealworms will work as well. So it's just different every single day. And then, I'm drawing a blank. You might be able to get lucky. Well, actually, another reason why I like the Provo Marina is you've got the river right there as well. So, if the ice fishing is not working for you, the river's a little bit low, but you can kind of work that river, and plenty of white bass. Most of the watchers here have probably been there during the spawning season, and that river stays pretty open for the most part. I've seen it froze over just once this year, but it is open, and you can probably catch some brown trout and rainbows out of there as well. So, I would say like the rare catches are walleye and pike, though. Most people probably you really have to work for them. There's probably more experienced anglers that can cover the details of that, but that's what I'm going for, is the white bass, the yellow perch, black crappie, and then the bluegills, the panfish, things like that as well. So, but I think I've covered just about everything that I can think of. It is kind of, it goes without saying, always dress for the occasion. Utah Lake does get windy, so you might be able to see 20 degree weather, but that wind chill will come in and all of a sudden it's 15 or 14 degrees. So always dress for the occasion. The first thing that's going to get cold on your body is your feet. So always be prepared. But in closing, really, the first year I ice fished, I did it for about $15 to $25. I caught hundreds of fish at Lincoln Beach. Now you'll find me at Provo Marina, American Fork Harbor. Sometimes in the back, there's some HOA dock users that'll invite me in, and we'll have a good time out there. So, but this is a great time to get out. It's a good day. I believe the ice is safe, and I appreciate the opportunity to cover the workshop.
Payton, thank you so much. We really appreciate you volunteering your time to help us with that. A couple of details I wanted to add real quick before we get to question and answer with Payton. I'm just going to share my screen real briefly to hit on this. We shared this information at last night's workshop, but in case anybody wasn't there, these are the prizes for the challenge this year. I love that Payton was giving some great suggestions on how to keep your costs low. Another way to keep your costs low would be winning some of these prizes. The hand auger is a one he mentioned there specifically. We've got 3 of the packages that have the hand auger in them, so that'll be a lot of fun for people. But those I just wanted to share are the prizes that are possible to be earned. Another thing we wanted to hit on really quickly is the remaining workshops. So the first 2 on the left are the ones we did last night and this morning. And then next week, on the 25th, there will be a presentation by our staff about the lake. So this is meant to be more of a general education. We'll be sharing information about the history, the work that's going on there right now, and the future of the lake. So one particular item I wanted to bring up, Payton mentioned the camera views The state park has a camera and Linden Marina has a camera on their websites. However, the commission is actually working with all 5 public marinas at the lake right now. We received a grant to install a network of cameras across all 5 of those marinas. So this is supposed to be done. The estimated time frame is to be done by June of this year, but there will be, depending on the number of cameras and the base of the size of the marina, there'll be 2 to 5 cameras at each marina showing lake conditions or ice conditions in this case, showing the parking conditions, the boat ramps, and other helpful information. So that's something we'll share next week, but kind of a teaser that there's some cool projects going on for hunters and anglers and other types of recreation enthusiasts. And then last but not least, I did want to share that there is a page on our website where that Payton was referring to on utahlake.org. And that is our public access points page. So when you get to utahlake.org, you just hover over Utah Lake, click access points. It brings you to this page with a Google map that has pin markers for all 27 public access points. When you click on any of them, it'll have some photos, etc. It'll have a website if there is one. But the nice thing is, if you do this on your phone, you hit the little directions button, it'll pop up a directions map directly inside of your Google Maps app on your phone that will then take you to that access point, because some are a little bit harder to find if you haven't been there before, and cell service can sometimes be difficult. So that's kind of a fun resource for helping people find new locations at the lake. So just wanted to make sure I shared a couple of those resources. Thank you again, Payton. Does anybody have any questions for Payton? Or I guess if you have a question about the 3 things I just hit on, I could answer that too. Feel free to chime in, or if you'd rather put it in the chat, we can read that off. That'd be great as well.
Cool. While somebody's thinking of any questions, mentioned at the beginning of this video, I do have a YouTube channel as well. It's called SkiddyFishing, SKIDDY fishing. And you'll actually see some of my Provo Marina experience. So everything I've talked about kind of in action, you can kind of see how I'm working the lures and the jigging methods and stuff like that. So it's a good way to kind of check it out. And I appreciate any subscriptions and just the views. And I've also, I found some access points with a drone, obviously away from the airport by Lincoln Beach and stuff, to kind of fly over some of these ice conditions and stuff too. And you might find that on my channel.
And we'll make sure we link to that on the YouTube recording of today's workshop as well for anybody who's interested.
Cool.
So it doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat. If anybody wanted to chime in before we wrap up here, I'll give you one last chance. Obviously, you can always follow up with Payton via YouTube, or I think you got Instagram, if I remember correctly too, right? Yeah,
it's all SkiddyFishing. So you can do Instagram, you can do YouTube. It doesn't really matter. So reach out to me. I'll share all my secrets in most cases, and help anybody out I can. And I'll even go out with you too. So
awesome. Well, it looks like I don't see any mics unmuting, so you must have hit everything perfectly, is what that means, right? That's how I feel as a presenter. No, it always makes me a little nervous. But thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll make sure we get this up on the YouTube channel, and remember to have a fun time out there, and best of luck in making a good catch today.
Cool. Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure, and we'll see you guys out on the ice.